She placed the box on the table with a calmness that didn't match the tension in the room. Aunt Rosa sat quietly in the corner, watching. Leo and Chloe were scrolling on their phones, not even pretending to care. And Carmen, always the star of her own show, tilted her head and gave that familiar half-smile, the one she used when she thought she had the upper hand. "This better be worth the trip," Carmen muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You know, after all these years, I expected something bigger." Victor chuckled. "Let's just say she's always been dramatic." Samantha didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice or explain herself. She just told them, "Open it." Inside was an envelope, white, simple, no bow, no card. Carmen looked confused, then annoyed. She pulled out the contents and started reading. Slowly, her face shifted from smug to stunned. $20,000, a luxury vacation for two, first-class flights, 5-star hotels, private tours across Japan. A gift? No. A message? Absolutely. Because this wasn't about generosity. It was about clarity. This moment wasn't the start of Samantha's story. It was the final chapter in one they never bothered to read. The story of a girl who was pushed aside, a girl they underestimated, and the woman she became without them. Let me tell you what really led to this moment. Samantha's earliest memories always had her dad in them. His laugh when she made up silly songs, the way he used to carry her on his shoulders just so she could see the world better. He made her feel like she mattered, like she was seen. That kind of love becomes your foundation, until the ground gives out. Carmen, even back then, felt like background noise. Present, but not really there. She'd show up at school events in polished outfits and perfect makeup, always with a camera, but rarely with warmth. She'd take the photo, post the moment, and then retreat. Samantha learned early that love from her mother had more to do with optics than emotion. Still, life at home wasn't chaotic. It just felt one-sided. Her dad would help with homework, drive her to piano lessons, cheer at every science fair. Carmen, meanwhile, focused on appearances. She hosted dinner parties, joined neighborhood committees, and always made sure the Christmas card looked perfect. From the outside, it probably seemed like they were the ideal family. Then, one Friday afternoon, everything shifted. Samantha was in the living room when it happened. One minute, her dad was laughing on the phone, pacing like he always did. The next, he collapsed, just dropped to the floor, his hand clutching his chest. The panic in the room was instant, loud. Carmen screamed, the neighbors called 911, and everything blurred into sirens and flashing lights. He was gone before they got to the hospital. A massive heart attack. No warning, no goodbye. The days that followed were a blur of casseroles, funeral arrangements, and condolences. People kept hugging Samantha, telling her how strong she was being. But no one noticed she'd gone quiet. Really quiet. She kept expecting Carmen to fall apart, or even to just talk to her. But instead, she got short answers and empty eyes. Her mother was focused on logistics, money, and how to get through the funeral without looking too distraught. She wore black. She greeted guests. She gave a speech that sounded like it was written for a company retreat. Not once did she sit with Samantha and just ask, "How are you?" But the moment that never left her happened late that night. She couldn't sleep. She walked down the hall toward the kitchen, where she heard her mother whispering on the phone. The tone wasn't grief, it was calculation. "I told him to slow down, he never listened. At least now I can sell the cabin. And his life insurance? It's more than I thought." Samantha stood in the dark, frozen. It wasn't even the words that hurt the most. It was cold, the immediate shift from wife to opportunist. In that instant, something inside her changed. She didn't cry that night. She didn't scream. She just turned around, went back to her room, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, realizing, at just 14, that the only parent who had ever really loved her was never coming back. And the one left behind wasn't really a parent at all. It didn't take long for Carmen to move on. Barely a year after the funeral, she announced she was seeing someone new. His name was Victor Alvarez, a real estate developer with an easy smile and expensive taste. Carmen introduced him like a trophy. "He understands me," she said, like that explained everything. Samantha was 15 when Victor moved in, and he didn't come alone. He brought his 2 kids, Leo and Chloe. Leo was loud, always talking, over everyone. Chloe was clever in the way that made adults call her precocious, but she knew how to twist a knife when no one was looking. The house changed overnight. Carmen redecorated, getting rid of most of Samantha's father's things. The old leather reading chair, gone. The fishing gear, packed up and donated. Even the framed photos started disappearing. It wasn't just remodeling, it was erasing. At first, Samantha tried to go along with it. She thought, maybe if she played nice, things would settle down. But every day made it clearer. She wasn't part of this new family. She was an afterthought. Victor never yelled. He didn't need to. His disinterest was sharper than any insult. He talked to Leo about school, asked Chloe about her soccer games, and laughed with Carmen over dinner. Samantha was a quiet presence at the edge of the table. If she spoke up, the response was always polite, quick, and forgettable. Carmen, meanwhile, acted like this blended family was a second chance at the life she deserved. She'd throw dinner parties again, always with Victor by her side. She bragged about Leo's grades, even when they weren't great. She posted Chloe's dance recitals on social media with captions like "Proud Mama," while Samantha stood just out of frame. The message was loud without ever being said. You don't belong here anymore. Holidays were the worst. One Christmas, Samantha got a sweater 2 sizes too big. Leo got a gaming console. Chloe got a trip to New York. Carmen laughed when Samantha looked confused. Oh, come on, she said. You don't even like video games. Be grateful. Grateful. That word started to sound like an insult. School became her escape. Not because it was perfect, but because at least it was consistent. She'd bury herself in books, stay after class, volunteer for extra projects. Anything to stay out of the house longer. She kept a journal, but it wasn't about boys or dreams or hobbies. It was more like survival notes. Don't ask Carmen for rides. Don't sit at the kitchen table when they're eating. Don't expect a birthday cake. Her bedroom became her whole world. She pinned old photos of her dad inside her closet, behind the door. Sometimes she'd stare at them before bed, wondering what he would say if he saw all of this. If he'd be proud of her for holding it together, or if he'd be furious at how quickly Carmen replaced him. She didn't cry often. Not anymore. Not because it didn't hurt, but because she was too used to it. Being invisible had become normal, and somehow, that felt worse than being hated. Worse still was how natural it felt for everyone else. Like the new version of the family never needed to include her, like her silence was proof that she was fine. But she wasn't. She was just quiet, because nobody ever listened. The one person who never treated Samantha like an afterthought was Aunt Rosa. She wasn't flashy. She didn't make grand speeches or post smiling selfies with inspirational captions. But when she hugged Samantha, she held on for an extra second. When she asked, "How are you doing, really?" she meant it. They didn't see each other often, maybe once a month at most, usually when Carmen needed someone to babysit or host a holiday dinner. But each visit felt like breathing fresh air after being stuck in a windowless room. Rosa would pull her aside, slip her an extra cookie, and listen. Not to fix things, just to let Samantha speak. It was the only place she didn't have to edit herself. Sometimes Rosa would drive her home after dinner, and they'd sit in the car for 10 minutes just talking. Nothing big. Books, school, little jokes. But Samantha clung to those moments like life rafts. They reminded her that she still mattered to someone. Over time, Rosa began sending handwritten notes, small ones, folded into Samantha's backpack. Little reminders like, "You are not invisible," or "Your dad would be so proud of you." Samantha never told anyone about the notes. She kept them in a shoebox under her bed, rereading them when things at home got especially heavy. It wasn't until Samantha turned 17 that Rosa told her the truth. They were sitting on the back porch of Rosa's house, sipping lemonade. It was quiet, just the sound of wind moving through the trees. Rosa looked nervous, almost unsure of how to start. "I've been keeping something for you," she said. Samantha stiffened. That sentence usually led to bad news. But Rosa reached into her bag and pulled out a small folder. "This is from your dad," she said softly. "He started it before he passed." He didn't tell Carmen. He gave it to me. Inside was paperwork. A savings account in Samantha's name. Years of deposits. Accrued interest. Rosa had added to it, little by little over the years. It wasn't millions, but it was enough for college. Enough to leave. Samantha didn't cry. Not right then. But her hands shook as she flipped through the pages. This was more than money. It was proof that her father had been thinking ahead. That Rosa had protected that hope quietly, patiently, without asking for anything in return. It changed everything. From that moment on, Samantha started planning differently. Not out loud, never out loud. But inside, she was building something, a future that didn't depend on anyone noticing her. One where she wouldn't have to beg for space at the table. She started researching schools at the library. She downloaded brochures in secret and kept them in a folder labeled History Notes. At night, she'd lie awake and imagine walking across a stage to get her diploma. Not because someone told her she could, but because she knew she would. Rosa never pressured her. She never asked for updates. She just made it clear, whatever you need, I'm here. That was the difference. Carmen gave conditions. Rosa gave space. And that account? It wasn't just for tuition, it was fuel. A quiet belief that someone had protected her future when no one else cared. It gave her something to reach for, something to fight for. Because now, she wasn't just surviving, she was preparing, quietly, steadily, and no one even noticed. By the time she was 18, Samantha had become a master at going unnoticed. It wasn't just survival, it was strategy. She kept her head down at home, stayed quiet at meals, and avoided conflict like it was a sport. While Leo threw parties and Chloe begged for brand name everything, Samantha was building her escape, one silent decision at a time. Her grades were flawless, not because anyone pushed her, but because she knew no one else would. She stayed late at school every day, joined clubs no one in her family ever asked about, and worked a part-time job shelving books at the local library. Every dollar she saved felt like armor. Every achievement was a brick in the wall she was building to protect her future. At home, things got worse before they got better. Leo was lazy but loud, always playing music through the walls or inviting friends over to drink in the basement. Chloe became Carmen's little echo, smirking when Samantha walked into a room, dropping comments like, "Must be nice to be so boring." Victor didn't intervene. Carmen acted like she didn't see it. The house wasn't violent, just indifferent. And somehow, that emptiness cut deeper. What stung more than the words was the absence of curiosity. No one asked how she was doing. No one noticed when she got accepted into the National Honor Society. There were no congratulations, no high fives, no proud glances. Just more silence. Samantha stopped expecting anything. No one asked where she was going when she stayed out late to study. No one noticed when she skipped family dinners. She could have been gone for a week, and the only person who might have called was Rosa. She found peace in structure, in planning. While Chloe talked about spring break and prom dresses, Samantha was memorizing deadlines for college applications. While Leo coasted through his senior year, she was mapping her future like it was a blueprint. The summer before college, she made her decision. She didn't announce anything. She didn't post online. She didn't even tell Carmen face to face. She packed her bags one night, loaded everything into the back of a used car Rosa helped her buy, and left before sunrise. She left a note on the kitchen counter. It wasn't long, just a few sentences thanking them for the roof over her head and saying she was going to college in Seattle. No signature, no "Love, Samantha." The note sat there for days. No one called. No one came after her. And that silence? It was louder than any door slam. She moved into a shared dorm with two strangers and slept on a mattress on the floor the first week. It didn't matter. She felt like she could finally breathe. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a guest in her own life. She called Rosa often, not for help, just to share the little victories, passing a tough exam, getting her first A in statistics, learning how to fix a leaky faucet on her own, getting a real bed, finally. No drama, no performance, just life. Hers. And even though it hurt that no one from her so-called family reached out, it also confirmed something she had suspected for a long time. They didn't lose her. They just never really had her. And now, for the first time, she was starting to figure out who she was when no one was telling her to be small. Seattle didn't care who her mother was. And that's exactly what Samantha needed. The city felt honest. Rainy, yes, but honest. People walked fast, talked straight, and didn't care if you came from money or dysfunction. You showed up, you worked hard, you earned your place. Samantha liked those rules. She could work with that. She hit the ground running in college. No distractions, no drama, no background noise from step-siblings or cold dinners, just textbooks, deadlines, and a blank slate. She chose marketing not because it was trendy, but because it made sense. She understood people. She'd spent most of her life studying them, especially the ones who didn't see her. Her professors noticed her drive. One in particular, Mr. Daniels, pulled her aside after a class and said, "You ask the kind of questions most people miss." He became more than a teacher. He became a mentor, helped her land internships, edited her resume, taught her how to walk into a room and speak like she belonged there. And slowly, she started to believe she did. By 21, she had a diploma, 3 internships under her belt, and a full-time job offer before graduation. While her classmates were figuring things out, she was already making moves. She didn't party. She didn't post selfies with fancy lattes. She got to work. The job was tough at first. Long hours, steep learning curve, high expectations. But that was her element. She wasn't afraid of pressure. She'd grown up under a different kind of weight. Office politics were nothing compared to the emotional landmines she'd spent years navigating back home. She rose fast. Promotions came not because she was loud, but because she delivered. Every project on time, every client was satisfied, every deadline was met without excuses, and every time someone underestimated her, well, they only did it once. Mr. Daniels kept in touch, cheering her on quietly. He never treated her like a special case, or praised her for beating the odds. He just said, "You're damn good at what you do. That's it." And that was all she ever wanted, to be seen for her work, not her story. By 26, she was a director of brand strategy at a major firm. She managed a team, presented to executives, and flew across the country for meetings. Her name was on presentations that shaped national campaigns. She had her own apartment, her own schedule, and, most importantly, her own peace. She built a life where she didn't have to earn anyone's affection. She didn't walk on eggshells. Her space was hers, clean, quiet, and filled with things. She chose books, candles, a few framed photos of her and Rosa, and a little note in her drawer that read, "You are not invisible." She didn't talk about her family much. Most people assumed they were just distant. She let them assume. But every milestone, every new title, every promotion, every deal closed, was a silent response to every moment she was ignored, dismissed, or overlooked. It wasn't about revenge. It was about proving, to herself most of all, that she never needed their approval to become something more. Success didn't fix everything, but it gave her something she'd never had growing up: control. And for Samantha, that was enough. The invitation came in the mail. Not a phone call, not even a text. Just a thick, glossy envelope with cursive writing that read, "Carmen Alvarez invites you to an evening of celebration, 50 and fabulous." Samantha stared at it for a full minute before she opened it. She hadn't heard from Carmen in years. Not for her graduation, not for her promotions, not even on her birthday. And now, suddenly, there was a reason to reconnect. Carmen's milestone. She almost threw it away. But something stopped her. Not curiosity, not sentiment. Just a sense of timing. She'd built her life brick by brick. She didn't need anything from them anymore. Which meant, for the first time, she could walk into that room with nothing to prove. She RSVP'd, yes. Picked out a sleek black dress. No flash, no statement. Just enough to show she belonged, even if they never thought she would. She didn't tell Rosa much, just that she had somewhere to be. The party was held at an upscale rooftop venue downtown. Everything sparkled: lights, champagne glasses, name cards, It screamed money, status, control, Carmen's entire personality, summed up in one evening. Samantha arrived on time, but no one noticed. Leo was at the bar. Chloe was showing off photos from some influencer trip. Victor stood by Carmen's side like a fixture. And Carmen? She spotted Samantha across the room, did a double take, then forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Well, well, Carmen said as Samantha approached. Didn't think you'd come. You look put together. Victor smirked. Didn't think she could afford heels like that. Samantha said nothing. She just smiled politely and handed over a simple square box wrapped in matte paper. Happy birthday, Carmen raised an eyebrow. You brought a gift? Open it later, Samantha said. You'll want to read the whole thing. She spent the next hour floating on the edges of the party. People assumed she was someone's assistant. One guest even asked if she was the event planner. She didn't correct them. She wasn't there to be recognized. She was there to make a point. Eventually, Carmen clinked her glass and gathered everyone for a toast. Thank you all for being here. 50 is a milestone. And tonight, I'm surrounded by everything I've built. My beautiful family, my success, and all of you who've supported me. Samantha stood still, hands clasped, calm. Carmen opened the gift on stage, reading aloud the details. A luxury. Trip to Japan, 2 first-class tickets, private accommodations, custom itinerary, worth over $20,000. There were gasps, applause, but then Samantha stepped forward. It's not for you, she said evenly. Carmen blinked. Excuse me? It's not a gift. It's a mirror of everything I've done without you. This trip, that's just a receipt for a life I built while you weren't looking. The applause faded. Guests glanced at each other. I came tonight to give you one last thing. Clarity. You didn't lose me. You gave me away. And that, she pointed to the envelope, is just a reminder of what that cost you. Someone near the back muttered, Damn. Carmen stood frozen, lips parted but silent. Samantha turned, walked toward the exit. No yelling, no tears, just the sound of her heels on polished tile. She didn't slam the door. She didn't look back. For the first time, she wasn't walking away in silence. She was walking away in control. The messages started that night. At first, they were short. What the hell was that? You embarrassed me. You think that was mature? Then came the voicemails. The tone shifted from sharp to desperate. Carmen's voice cracked in one, angry in the next. She jumped between emotions like someone flipping through channels: grief, guilt, rage, regret. By the next morning, there were paragraphs. Long, emotional, texts trying to rewrite history. You misunderstood me. I did the best I could. You think Rosa's perfect? She didn't raise you. I did. She sent old photos, pictures from birthdays where Samantha had fake smiles, screenshots of social media posts Carmen thought proved she had loved her all along. It was a digital storm, fast and loud and full of holes. Victor didn't reach out. Neither did Leo or Chloe. But Carmen? She wouldn't stop. Then came the guilt tactics. You'll regret this when I'm gone. I was grieving. You think that was easy for me? You only remember the bad things. Rosa poisoned you against me. She tried flattery. She tried anger. She even offered to meet in person, just to talk. But Samantha knew that pattern. She'd seen it her whole life. Carmen turning herself into the victim the moment she lost control. And every message, no matter how it started, ended the same way. Come back, engage, let me control the narrative again. Samantha didn't respond, not once. The silence wasn't cruel, it was necessary. Because deep down, she understood what Carmen was really trying to say. Don't let go of the version of me that makes me feel okay about myself. And Samantha? She was done carrying that burden. She didn't owe her a response. Not after years of silence when it mattered. Not after being erased from birthday photos, overlooked at holidays, ignored in her own home. The door had been closed long ago. It just took a little longer for Carmen to notice. Days turned into weeks. The texts slowed but didn't stop. Some were cryptic. "Hope you're proud." Others were almost laughable. "I showed your gift to my friends. They thought it was so generous." Generous. That word clanged in her chest. Carmen still didn't get it. There was no apology, not a real one. No, "I see now how I failed you." No, "You were right to walk away." Just spin, just noise. So Samantha did the only thing left to do. She blocked the number. Not in a dramatic gesture, not with anger. Just quietly, like closing a window during a storm. Click. Silence. And then, for the first time in her adult life, there was peace. No buzz from an incoming message, no flash of Carmen's name on the screen. Just quiet. The kind that didn't feel empty, it felt earned. She told Rosa later, over dinner. Rosa didn't say much, just reached across the table and squeezed her hand. That was enough. Because this wasn't about winning. It wasn't about revenge. It was about freedom. The kind you don't announce. The kind you live in. And Samantha wasn't going back. Not to fix things, not to explain herself, and definitely not to soften the truth. That chapter was closed, permanently. A few weeks later, Samantha stood outside Aunt Rosa's house holding the same box she had once handed to Carmen. Only this time it wasn't wrapped in drama or tension. It was wrapped in purpose. Rosa opened the door, wearing her usual soft cardigan and a look of surprise. "You're early," she said with a smile. "I brought you something," Samantha said, stepping inside. She placed the box gently on the table and sat down across from her. Rosa raised an eyebrow. "Another one of your thoughtful surprises?" "Kind of," Samantha said. "But this one comes with a condition. You're not allowed to say no." Rosa laughed, but she looked cautious as she opened the lid. Inside, the same travel itinerary. Japan. 2 weeks. First class everything. All expenses covered. She froze. "Samantha, what is this?" "It was never meant for Carmen," she said quietly. "It was always meant for the person who showed up. The one who stayed." Rosa blinked, tears starting to form. "You carried me when no one else did. You protected my future when you didn't have to. You reminded me I was worth something when I didn't believe it. And now, I just want you to see the world, to breathe, to feel joy that isn't tied to carrying someone else's burden." Rosa sat back in her chair, speechless. Her hands trembled just slightly as she folded the papers. "I don't need a thank you," she said eventually. "I know," Samantha replied. "But sometimes people deserve one anyway." She reached across the table and held her hand. "This isn't payback. It's just a thank you for being my real mother." They sat like that for a long time. No noise, no phone buzzing. Just the kind of silence that feels full. Later, as Rosa hugged her goodbye, she whispered, "You didn't have to do this." "I know," Samantha replied again. "But that's the thing about love. The real kind. You don't have to earn it. It's just there." On the drive home, Samantha rolled the window down. The wind rushed in, cool and crisp. She let herself feel it, not just on her skin, but in her chest. That lightness. That's quiet. That peace she had spent years chasing. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel like she'd won anything. What she felt was done. Not unfinished, not unresolved. Done in the best possible way. She looked in the rearview mirror and saw her reflection. Not the girl who had once waited for love from the wrong people, but the woman who gave it freely to the right ones. And there was something powerful in that. In knowing you didn't become cold just because others were. In knowing you didn't let bitterness win. There was no need for another confrontation. No need to revisit old wounds. The story was over, and she had rewritten the ending herself. Not with vengeance, not with bitterness, but with grace. Because In the end, family isn't about blood or last names. It's about who stands with you when no one else does. It's about who sees you when the world looks away. Who holds you up when you're too tired to keep going. Who never asks you to shrink just to fit in. And Samantha? She finally knew who her family was. She always had. And this time, she didn't walk away from anything. She walked toward everything she'd built. With love, with pride, and with absolutely nothing left to prove.